It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Welcome to Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. We believe that retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of Ben Taatjes and myself, we appreciate you tuning in here today. Well, on today's episode, we are taking a break from our archive series to share an open and honest conversation about 2024. Like many years, it's been a journey filled with both victories and challenges. Ben Taatjes and myself discuss how these challenging seasons, though difficult to appreciate in the moment, often become the foundation for our most significant personal growth. Join us as we explore how God uses these moments to shape us, strengthen us, and draw us closer to Him. Whether you're currently experiencing mountaintops or valleys, this conversation reminds us that every season has purpose, including retirement. Enjoy. All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Jerrid Sebesta joining you on another episode of Retire Repurposed. So glad you're joining us, and perhaps you're new to the show. If we are joining new platforms every so often, and so if you are joining us or listening for the very first time, perhaps you're expecting a show on the finances of retirement, strictly on investments. These are all things that we do not talk about on this show. This is where life intersects retirement, how you can make retirement not the ending, but rather the beginning, just like we intro every single show, where you step into a new I would say sphere or a circle of fullness in your life, where it can actually be the crescendo, not just cruise control or worse off, where your quality of life and the purpose and the fulfillment that you have in your life perhaps even goes down. So if you are a new listener, we sure do appreciate you tuning in here today. We've spent the last several weeks, we've been kind of doing some throwback episodes of Retire Repurposed. We have well over 200 episodes in the archives. And since Ben Taatjes is rewriting, or at least writing a revised version of his original book, Repurpose, The Untold Story of Retirement in America, we thought it would be fun to go back to some of the throwback, kind of the foundational messages of Repurposed that date back many, many years, I think even pre-COVID, if I can think clearly on that one. But they've gone back a long time, we'll just say that. But we're going to start afresh here, and as we round out the last couple of weeks of 2024, we are going to bring you a fresh episode here today, and we're just going to talk a little bit kind of off the cuff here and have a really, really fun conversation about life, about some of the challenges we faced and how you can apply that to your retirement. So Ben Taatjes joins me now, and it's been a year. I think many people would probably sum up 2024 as perhaps a really, really good year, but I think for a lot of folks it's like it's been a year, and that can mean probably a lot of things to a lot of people, right?
Yeah, it can, Jerrid. You and I were talking before jumping on the air here. Just, you've been through a journey yourself. Certainly in the last year, and I think we go into some of that. Just talk through some of those things, because I love hearing your heart behind that. And I think being authentic is something that you and I have always tried to strive for on the show. But I think more than anything, as we're rewriting the book. And as I'm working with the publisher and talking through themes, and once in a while people ask me, what was the single biggest thing that you wish would be the takeaway from the book, or the either the last one or the new one? What do we got to make sure we drive home? And I think this idea of less of myself allows for more of God in my life. Yeah. And I can think back personally to the times where I was probably at my best, like meaning when I was the absolute, today, looking at it, feeling as if I'm the closest to God that I've ever been, is a time where I was walking through some of the most painful experiences of my life. Yeah. And I look back at those times, I'm like, God, what were you trying to show me? Afterwards, sure. I can see it. Yeah. It always takes until a little bit of time to see it. And so right now, Jerrid, I've got an acquaintance of mine that found out over Thanksgiving that he had a brain tumor, and a pretty serious one. Mm-hmm. And I was so encouraged by what he talked about on on Facebook about when he first got that diagnosis. And yes, it was shocking, but here's how I'm looking at it. And I think his ability to kind of speak to that brought me back to a time when I was probably going through the hardest thing that as a dad I've ever been through. I remember it was back when my oldest daughter, who's now in college, was stuck in Children's Hospital in Minneapolis, and she had a number of surgeries on her kidneys, and one of them was really, really, really tough. And we thought everything was going well, and then it took a turn for the worse. And I can remember reaching out to a friend of mine and getting introduced to Pete. That's this guy's name. And he called me, and we sat together and prayed over my daughter in the hospital. And I got to tell you, Jerrid, it's in those moments that you know you need God. When you're so beat up, when you're so hurt, when you're so worried about somebody else, is when I think the most when God does the most in our life, and when we're allowed to get closer and closer to Him. And fast forward is my daughter's great today. She's been healed through doctors, through a lot of some miraculous things, and she's living a perfectly healthy life. Yeah. And now this individual who was on the phone with us back then praying over our daughter is now is in the middle of it, and we're lifting him up in our prayers. So if for our listeners, guy's named Pete, and is a pastor and just an amazing man, and we're praying for healing for him, and at this time.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him, and I have seen his testimony online. It is really inspiring when we see people exude that type of faith. And I think that's obviously that's one of the main points of life, is to grow in our faith. Talk about the this conundrum we find ourselves in as human beings, where if the ultimate goal is to deepen our level of faith, to grow closer to our Creator, which I think is a foundational truth for every human being. There's this innate desire to want to get to connect with your Creator, right? But I shouldn't say it's only done. One of the main methods by which you do that is through challenges. Like, it just seems like that's always the case. But an interesting, not that this is going to turn into some philosophical podcast, but we were talking about this online with a group of friends, and we were having a very open discussion. And I posed the question, and we can kind of go down this road if you choose to, but so many people, when challenges arise, they think that it's from one side or the other. It's from the light or it's from the dark. And if I look back at some of my challenges, they turned into so many great things, as for you. So it's like sometimes we find ourselves trying to pray away some of these things that may or may not have the ability to take us to a whole new level of faith. And if that's the case, are they truly all attacks from below, or are they perhaps gifts in many respects to help us expand to a deeper level of faith in Him? And when you frame it like that, it makes you look at the challenges a little bit differently. What resonates for you on that?
Well, I think, Jerrid, it's the prayer needs to be, "Thy will be done." I mean, whatever God is doing in our life any time. I mean, our ultimate goal should be to live into that. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a biblical scholar. Certainly not somebody who has the answers to those things. But I can tell you from my own experiences. Yep. When I am at my lowest point, God is usually at the strongest. I mean, He's usually doing the most within me. Sure. And I think that's some of our problem, and not some, I think it is our problem in our society today. Too many of us are becoming self-reliant. And we tend to push Him out instead of it, allowing Him to do what He wants to do in our life. So I can't say, and I certainly believe that God allows things. I mean, He ordains things happen that are hard for us to go through. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, we should get a pastor on our show to kind of walk through that, and they certainly don't know either. But, I look at all of these hard things and I try to say, well, what are you teaching me? Or after the fact, usually, what are you teaching me?
Yeah.
What should I be learning? And whenever I'm in the middle of it, that's hard to say.
Almost
God, it's impossible to say because I'm saying it today and things are going really well. Mm-hmm. And I'm challenging myself, well, what God are you showing me in this season as well?
Sure.
So in those hardest times, we have to be open to his leading. But I think back to this show and this whole idea of retirement, I think that is one of the toughest things for retirees is when you can make a choice not to even have to work for money, and money just comes in automatically. Right. You're just I've got everything I need. Mm-hmm. It's very easy, just living in this country and having an amount of wealth like many of our clients do. Mm-hmm. That is a challenge in being able to say, I'm pretty self-sufficient right now. I got my monthly paychecks, everything's met, I'm happy. And I'm not saying there aren't clients and other people in retirement going through really, really hard things. But for a lot of us, when things are going well, we tend to forget, right? And we tend to, again, put the reliance back on ourselves. Yep, I got this. I've done it myself. I always feel like when things are going well, I start creeping into the mode of, I got this. And then something reminds me, of course, that I don't.
Yeah. And again, not to, again, turn it into a philosophical debate. What I have learned as I've kind of grown in my own faith, I feel like sometimes that we, how do I phrase this? We look at challenges as bad things that need to be eliminated, right? And we need to get out of this as fast as we can, and I want to climb out of this hole as fast as I can. And I think like perhaps sometimes in an attempt to like not sit in the discomfort of having uncertainty, whether you have choice or not. I mean, if you have like a sick child, I mean, you're kind of at the begging mercy of health and stuff. But there are certain decisions that are made. For example, being able to leave your job and retire. I mean, there's probably some level of uncertainty there. But I kind of always go back to like the thorn in the side, right? How come that was never taken from his side? And I kind of land at like maybe that thorn was kind of there as a necessity to keep him like in alignment and have faith, because there was always just a little bit of discomfort there in our life to kind of keep us in track. And again, I feel like that goes to your point as far as retirement, where it can get a little bit too comfortable, and then you find yourself kind of on a slippery slope, and that's where we can find ourselves in trouble.
Yeah, it comes back to that. We have a dependence on God, and a reminder that things come from Him, through Him, and we need to, I guess, whatever the challenge is. I think many times realize that, this is something that is not fun. This is something that is hard. But it is definitely God ordained, and this is part of my life right now. Sure. And I've seen friends walk through incredibly hard things. I got a good friend who had a massive stroke and still struggles to this day. And this is years ago, and to move and to speak. Mm-hmm. And why? We ask ourselves why. Why would this happen? Why would God, even allow that to happen? And I will be asking Him someday. What was meant by this? I mean, that's tough. And why did things happen to, innocent kids, if you will? I mean, we know nobody's innocent, but there's a lot of really hard questions, Jerrid, and tough things. But I think at the end of the day, what I want, our audience to hear, the people that listen to this show, is like, when things are great, make sure you have gratitude. Make sure you're thanking God for those things. And we talked about over Thanksgiving in our family. It's like, what if the things you didn't say thank you for were gone the next day? Mm-hmm. Oh man, that's kind of eye-opening. And how many times, you do a gratitude walk. We've talked about that before. I've started that as well. I don't think I walk as far as you do, but at least when I'm out there and I'm walking my dog, I'm like, man, what do I have to be thankful for today? And I think that changes your mindset, moves you in a place of it just compounds, and I see more things I'm thankful for. But it can't just be, I'm always full of gratitude, because you're going to see hard things. Yeah. And when they come, to look at it as, what are you teaching me, God?
Why is a really difficult question. You'll find yourself going down an endless rabbit trail if you always ask why. I think what is God trying to show me? What do I need to learn? Not because I'm a bad person and I need reprimanding, but like, what do I need to learn for me to go into the next level of where God wants to take me? That's a much better question to ask. Even on the gratitude walks, like my default emotion is not gratitude. It's a lot more defaulted towards gratitude now than what it was in the past. I think God can work on a desire to have a desire. I would challenge people that don't maybe have that desire, where they just don't have a desire to be gracious or giving or generous. I think even being open with God to say, like, I have the desire to have the desire, and I think that even opens up space for God to work. I'm learning that more. It's like there's these like spaces in the unseen. And if you ask the right question and have the right mindset, you can actually create these little, this is a bad word, but like these little portals, like these little areas for God to shine in. And the more that I do that, the more I start to see what he's trying to do. And it makes more sense. Because if you just look at it as face value, it just doesn't, how do you make sense of what happens in this world? You really can't. But if you can create those little spaces, then you start to see it. And I think that's kind of having the spiritual mind that the Bible talks about.
Yeah, Jerry, I think it's, as we started the show, less of me allows more of him. So when you're giving God even these little chunks, try it. Give him a little space to work in your life, like you were just talking about. I think that's where, so many times I've been guilty of that, where I'm like, oh, I don't have room. I do not have time. I don't allow him to work. When I do surrender, when I deny myself a little bit and allow God to work, that's his invitation. He invites us in, but we do have to make room. We can't just continue living our life like everybody else and expect God to be moving within our life. No. And I don't know, I think that's where if there's times where I've seen myself fall short on my personal walk, it's definitely comes to selfishness. When I see relationships get strained within my life, it's usually because of selfishness. And the Bible talks about that is Jesus came to serve, not to be served. Like that needs to be at the heart of the message for retirees, for all of us, I guess, is, hey, we're created to serve. We're created to be with others, but then also not just with them, but serving them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we ultimately find a lasting, happiness, joy, right? Is when we're able to walk into that. And if we're only looking out for our own interests, and we're being more and more self-focused in retirement, which is very easy to do. I'm trying not to step on anybody's toes there, but maybe a little, is retirement, if done by the world's standards, is a very selfish thing. Mm-hmm. Still goes back to the most important message from the first version of Repurposed was, and if you're not careful, retirement is selfish. Mm-hmm. And I wanted Retirement is Selfish to be a chapter in the book. Yep. And the publisher said, no, it might just be there this time, because I think if you say you're going to retire the way that the world would have you retire, it is 100% about you. It's about your ability to not have to work so that you can do more for you. So you can take the trip, you can do the things that you've always wanted to do. Yep, we're trying to, again, everything sounds like it's about you. And the happiest, the most joyful retirees come to that place at some point where they're like, yeah, this was never about me. This was always about others. And that's the only way I've been able to find the fulfillment, no matter how much more I get, no matter what I'm doing. And there's nothing wrong with stuff. There's nothing wrong with the higher income. There's nothing wrong with not going to work every day, unless the focus ends up being you.
Yeah.
Then it turns into a period of discontentment. You're like, oh, something's missing. I can't figure out what's missing. You ever have that feeling? I have. Yeah. And it's usually when I haven't served or stepped forward and actually helped somebody, or I started focusing too much on myself.
Yeah, I've noticed when, I've gone through seasons where I've got a message on my heart, preaching the message. The message is about the message that God gave me. And then it can turn into something that's not supposed to. Then enters into the equation flesh, worldly desires, patterns of the world, ego, expectations. It's the same. It's the same thing. So that we're not picking on retirees here, even though in the context of our conversation we are. But it's the same equation, whether you're 30, 40, 65, 75, or whatever. As soon as you bring in expectations, and those expectations are to serve self, it's destined to have some repercussions, and you may be faced with challenges that you weren't foreseeing. And again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, is it possible that some of those challenges, and I'm using air quotes, not bad things happening, but challenges, could be to reset you in some way to get you back on track?
Yeah, for sure. I think they are. I think certainly we should be viewing them that way, right? And you said something that I love talking about with people: the patterns of this world. Mm-hmm. The pattern of this world, Jerrid. I would say the pattern of Ben's world, personally, is you do really well for a while and you make sure you're focusing on others and you're serving and you're asking the right questions and you're being other focused. And then pretty soon you got it and you think, oh, I don't need God anymore. And I just continue to kind of get, and then something happens, boom, reset. Okay, that's right. We got to come back. And the pattern is, I think for most people, if they're honest, it's, try to focus on self too much, and then something reminds us that we can't.
Sure.
And then we come right back to where we were.
Yep.
And God calls us not to fall into the patterns of this world, right? And to watch out for that. But I think there's a lot of patterns of the world that get us in a lot of trouble. That's just one of them. But I think that's the one that I'm trying to work on. I think as we go into, this next year, just to be always looking at others as an opportunity to serve, whether that be your spouse, close to home, children, spouse, your community, your family. Maybe it's an extended family. But I think even the community, I think God's doing big things today. And I think it starts with people, nearest home, where you're able to make the biggest impact, and that spreads from there. So get that right. And this is a word for me too, but get that right, and then step out from there, and then go to community, and then go to, the larger community, and even the country, and then beyond. But I think it starts with us recognizing more of Him requires less of us.
Yeah, there's a question that's on my heart that I've been really challenging myself to ask myself more often in every facet of my life, whether it's going well or not well. But what else is possible? And again, the way that I view it in my head, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but when I ask that question, it opens up space because it creates curiosity, right? It seems like curiosity is what allows us to kind of see the bigger picture. So I would challenge people too to consider that question as you go into this next year. What else is possible? And what a great demographic to bring it to, because I think retirees maybe assume that the next year is going to be pretty much the same. They don't ever look up. It's always the same or maybe a step down, and that's not what we're saying here.
I think retirees today have an opportunity they should look at every day with that question in mind. The one you just phrased is, what is possible? And I've seen some retirees do amazing things in their families and the communities that they're part of. And too often, we want to put them on this spot of, move out of the way, and it's you're kind of washed up, old. We got the young people in, and I continue to believe that retirees today, mentoring young people today, is the strongest. It's the way forward, and too many retirees look at their life as at this stage of life is more pushing towards the end versus the beginning.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.